Today was Friday, our first full day of vacation in sunny Southern California, and we had just returned from a trip to Knott's Berry Farm in Orange County. I had been there once before, many years ago when I was stationed at the now-closed Marine Corps Air Station at El Toro. We all had a great time, and since there were still a few hours of sunshine left, decided to spend some time in the pool. Before I continue, let me tell you a little bit about us. My name is Shane McKnight. I'm 39 years old, and I'm a lead software developer for an aerospace firm that specializes in avionics for military and commercial aircraft. It may seem strange to you that a software developer works in an environment like this, but you'd be surprised at how much software is used in modern aircraft. I started working there after graduating from college 13 years ago. I had spent 4 years in the service as an avionics technician working on fighter jets and was a perfect fit for the job. I met Kay shortly after arriving in town on a blind date. Kay is 3 years younger than me and works as a nurse at a fairly large medical clinic in the city. Her pretty face and long blonde hair attracted me from the beginning. We dated, fell in love, and got married. A couple years later, we bought a house on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have been married for 13 years and have 2 sons, John, who is now 10 years old, and Robert, who is only 2 years younger. Fortunately, they both prefer their mother, and I suspect they will soon be attracted to girls. John, like his mother, has blonde hair, but Robert's hair is more sandy in color, like Kay's father. Kay took Robert's pregnancy hard and convinced me to have a vasectomy after he was born. I reluctantly agreed and had it done at the clinic where she works. Kay said the surgery could be canceled if we ever decided to have children again, so I agreed to her request. As far as I could tell, we were doing well so far. We both had good jobs that we enjoyed, a nice house, 2 cars, 2 kids, and a fairly active life. I thought I had it all. Sure, we had problems in our marriage, just like everyone else. But we always seemed to be able to work things out. At the moment it happened, I had no idea that my whole world was about to come crashing down, and this would be the last weekend we would spend together as a family. As I watched, Kay put on her new bikini. She told me she had bought it for the trip, and I loved looking at her in it. At 36, she could pass for someone 5 or even 10 years younger than her. I whistled as I watched her show me the tight-fitting 2-piece suit. "Forget the pool," I told her. "Why don't we stay here and warm the bed?" She laughed and slapped my arm. "Is that all you think about?" she asked playfully. "When I think about you, it is," I replied, wrapping my arms around her. "Well, we better get to the pool before it's too late," she said. "Go check on the boys, please." "Sure," I said. The suite we rented for the week was quite large and consisted of 2 bedrooms arranged in a central room. Each bedroom had its own bathroom. The suite also had a kitchenette. It was more like a small apartment than a regular hotel room. Of course, it didn't come cheap, but in my opinion, my family was worth it. The boys slept in one room, and Kay and I slept in the other. I checked on the boys and made sure they were ready to go. Once I was done with that, we headed to the pool. I saw Kay looking at something on her phone and wondered what she was doing. "Find anything?" I asked. It seemed like she was constantly on that phone and almost never let it out of her sight. She shook her head. "No, just bringing our relatives up to speed," she said. Her relatives lived in Pittsburgh and had lived there for years, while mine were still in my native Florida and were now retired. I didn't think about anything else, and we headed to the pool. After playing in the water with the boys for a bit, I got out and dried off. But no sooner had I sat down with my wife than a rather tall, clean-shaven man approached us. He looked to be about 30 years old, had short dark hair, and was dressed in shorts and a short-sleeved t-shirt. He introduced himself as Dan and shook our hands. "Mind if I sit with you for a while?" he asked, sitting down on a chair next to Kay. There were plenty of free chairs by the pool, and I couldn't help but wonder why he had decided to join us. Before I sat down, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card that said he was an account manager. Read, "Salesman," for Acme Medical Supplies, a company based in Columbus, Ohio, about 3 hours down the freeway from us. "Isn't Acme one of the companies your clinic uses?" I asked Kay. I'd seen one of their vehicles outside the clinic a couple times in the past. She nodded her head. "Yes," she said. "It's one of several companies we use." She turned to Dan. "Have you ever come to Pittsburgh?" He nodded his head. "Yeah, I do," he said. "About once every 2 or 3 weeks. My territory stretches from Columbus to Pittsburgh." "I see," I said. "So what brings you here?" "I'm here for a conference that starts this weekend," he said. "I'll probably be here most of the week." We talked some more and learned that he actually lives with his wife and 2 girls in Zanesville, a town along Interstate 70 between Columbus and Pittsburgh. Dan described himself as a happily married man, despite living in a house full of women. He joked that apparently he only manages to get girls. That's funny, Kay said. It seems like Shane can only produce boys. He spent some time with us and even played water volleyball with me and the boys in the pool. He seemed like a nice enough guy, and I didn't see anything between him and Kay that would cause concern. But for some reason, my radar was active and running on high. Eventually, we decided it was time for dinner and got out of the water. Dan said goodbye to us, saying he enjoyed the day and hoped to see us again. We enjoyed our evening meal and finally headed to the room. Can you believe it? Kay said once we were in the bedroom. We're all girls. Maybe Dan will get me the girl I've always wanted. What? I asked myself. Where the hell did that come from? Don't even joke about something like that, I told her. Remember, it was your idea to get me surgery after Robert was born, and I will absolutely not tolerate any cheating. Oh, I was just kidding, she said. I wouldn't do anything like that to you. I love you too much. I love you too, I said. But there's nothing funny about what you're saying. Nothing more was said. But for a moment, I thought a look of guilt flashed across her face. Maybe I was just reading too much into what she said. After spending time with the family in the center part of our room, we sent the boys to bed and headed to our room. When I was ready for bed, Kay said she couldn't sleep and asked if I would mind if she went for a late-night swim. I don't mind, I replied. Do you want me to join you? No, she said. Someone has to stay here with the boys. I shouldn't linger. Okay, I said. She got up and walked out the door. Since our room on the third floor overlooked the pool and hot tub, I took my camera and put it on a tripod. I loved taking pictures and videos of my wife when she wasn't looking. She was the most beautiful woman in the world to me, and I just enjoyed watching her. I turned on the camera and zoomed in, seeing her enter the fenced-in area of the pool. She slid into the water and swam for a while and then climbed out. She wiped herself off and sat down in one of the lounge chairs along the pool. After a while, I noticed movement and pointed. Dan had just entered the pool area, still in shorts and a t-shirt. He sat down next to her and they talked for a while. I thought she was looking at our room, as if checking to see if I was watching her. I knew the windows were tinted, and I was far enough away from them in the darkened room that she couldn't see me. Then she leaned over and seemed to kiss it. I zoomed in to get a closer shot, but she and Dan got up from their chairs and walked out of the pool together, and I couldn't get a clear shot. I thought that maybe Kay was on her way back to our room, so I turned the camera off and took it off the tripod. I lay back on the bed contemplating what I had just seen. Had she really cheated on me with some guy we had just met? I looked at the dresser and saw that she had left her cell phone there. For a moment, I considered opening it to see what she was doing, but changed my mind. I didn't want to invade her privacy only to find out later that nothing was going on there. I waited and waited, but Kay never showed up. Shit, I thought. How long does it take to take the elevator to the third floor? 2 hours later, she walked into our bedroom, and I immediately knew something was different. First of all, she smelled. Different, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. It's about time you came back, I said. I saw you leaving the pool a couple hours ago. Sorry, she said. Dan came down and we talked for a while, and then we went to a restaurant and had a few drinks and chatted. I must have lost track of time. Shit, I thought. That bitch just lied to me. I know what alcohol smells like, and she certainly didn't have any breath. Suddenly, I lost the urge to touch her and started to feel nauseous. I got up and rushed into the bathroom. I closed and locked the door and barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. It felt like I was throwing up everything I had eaten all week. Kay knocked on the door. Honey, she said. Are you okay? I'm nauseous, I said in between dry sighs. I washed my face and sat on the toilet again. How long has this been going on? I asked myself. Why is she doing this to us? It's not like I disappeared all the time and let myself get out of shape. Why? Why? I asked myself over and over again. It's amazing what thoughts go through a person's head at a time like this. Was my whole marriage a sham? Were the boys even mine? Damn her to hell. I don't even know how long I sat there thinking about all of this. Eventually, she knocked on the door again. What? I yelled. Honey, do I need to call you a doctor? She asked quietly. No, I'll be right out, I replied. After making sure I cleaned myself up, I sprayed some Lysol in the bathroom and went back to the bedroom. I had no desire to look at the woman I thought I was going to grow old with. She tried to approach me, but I waved her away. We lay on the bed again, and for the first time in our married life, I rolled away from her without even giving her a goodnight kiss. I love you, she said quietly. I said nothing in response. Good night, she finally said, and turned on her side. I thought I heard her sob a few times, but I didn't care anymore. Finally, Saturday came and I got out of bed. I hadn't gotten much sleep the night before, and what I had managed was filled with nightmares of Kay and Dan having fun in bed, and me lying there, unable to move or do anything. I didn't say anything to Kay and went about my business in the bathroom. I had promised to take the kids to Disneyland, and nothing Kay could do would make me break that promise. How are you feeling this morning? Asked Kay as we got dressed. I hope you're feeling better than you did last night. I feel like shit right now, I growled. Maybe you should stay here tonight, she said. I shook my head. I promised to take the boys to Disneyland, and that's exactly what I'm going to do, I said. At least I'm not breaking my promises. She recoiled slightly, but didn't say anything. We got dressed and led the boys downstairs to breakfast, saying almost nothing to each other. Dan came over to our table as we were eating. He took a chair and sat in the corner between Kay and me. For a moment, I thought I saw a smirk appear on his face. Kay looked up at him, smiling. I felt like ripping his damn head off. So, what's on your agenda? He asked. We're going to Disneyland, Kay said. Oh, that sounds fun, he said. Mind if I come with you? I couldn't believe the nerve of this asshole. What about your convention? I asked, hoping I sounded neutral enough to keep both crooks off guard. Oh, there's just a bunch of boring seminars there today, he said. I've heard all that stuff before. Well, Dan, I think Shane wanted to make it a family outing, Kay said, looking at me. Good for you, I thought, even though it was a little late. Dan shrugged. That's right, Dan, I said. I promised my family a day at Disneyland, and that's exactly what I'm going to give them. I understand, he said. Family is the most important thing. Yeah, I thought. Too bad you didn't think of that when you entertained my wife last night. Maybe next time, he added. Not likely, I thought to myself. Have a good time, guys, he said as he stood up. We got up too, since everyone had already finished breakfast. As we were leaving, I thought I saw him signal Kay, telling her to call him later. What's gotten into you? She asked me as we boarded the bus to Disneyland. You were so cold to Dan. I could ask the same of you, dear wife, I said, putting emphasis on the word wife. Or I could ask, who attacked you? Shane, that's not nice, she said, pouting. Please, I said sarcastically. Look, I added, trying to sound calm. Let's just have a good day for the boy, okay? Okay, Shane, she said. I don't know what's gotten you so upset lately, but whatever it is, I'm sorry, okay? Yeah, I said in a neutral tone. Normally, I would have hugged and kissed her, and we would have put our differences behind us, but not this time. After what she'd tried to do to me last night, I didn't even want to touch her or look at her, and there was no way she was going to get out of it. She leaned back in her chair, frustrated, apparently, that her attempt to get me comfortable with her had failed. I hope you won't be mad for the rest of our vacation, she said. I looked at her but didn't say anything. We spent the day at Disneyland, and I made sure the boys had a good time. I pretty much ignored Kay for most of the trip, but I tried to remain polite for the boys' sake. It wasn't easy, but I think I succeeded. More than once, however, I saw her texting someone on the phone. Was she texting Dan? Who knows, I thought. After lunch, the rather tired family crawled back onto the bus. I looked over at Kay as we sat down. So, did you have a good day? I asked. She nodded her head. Yeah, it was, she said. It would have been better if you had talked to me, though. I'm sorry, I said. I'm still not feeling very well after last night, I added. Maybe you should try to get a good night's sleep tonight, she said. Yeah, maybe, I said. Right, I thought. As if a good night's sleep will get you out of cheating. Bitch. We drove the rest of the way in silence and had lunch when we got back to the hotel. Once we were in the room, I decided to try one last time with Kay. I walked over to her and hugged her. I'm sorry I've been such a bear, I said. Why don't we put the kids to bed and enjoy a private makeout session together? I'd love to, honey, she said. But I just recently got my period. I'm really sorry. What? I asked myself. I'm not a doctor, but I'm not stupid either. I knew her last period had ended the week before we left Pittsburgh. What kind of game was she playing? I'm sorry too, I said. Well, I'm tired. I think I need to lie down for a while. Why don't you do that, dear? She said. If you don't mind, I'm going to go down to the pool for a while. Yeah, go ahead, I said, resigned to the fact that she was probably going to be having fun with Dan for the next half hour. I watched her walk out the door. I pulled out my camera and set it up to see if I could catch them together. Sure enough, they met at the pool. This time I zoomed in to get a close-up shot of them. They talked for a bit before leaving. These were not the actions of people who had just met. This time I got clear photos and video. I was sure they were heading back to his room. I sat down on the bed and wondered what I should do. Part of me wanted to find his room number and go kick his ass, but I knew I would end up in jail. Then I saw that she had left her purse and phone on the dresser. I picked up the phone and saw that it was locked. I knew her passphrase was John's or Robert's birthday, so I tried using the month and day of John's birthday. Bingo. I was logged in. I started going through her text messages and only then realized what was going on. As far as I could tell, these two had been in a serious relationship for the past year. As it turned out, Dan was the Acme rep at the clinic where she worked and regularly stopped by every other week. During that time, they partied when they found the time. But things had changed dramatically in the last couple months. Kay had talked to Dan about getting pregnant with a girl and decided that he would be the best candidate to get her pregnant. She told him about our planned week-long vacation and actually suggested that he try to come to California so they could be together. Even worse was the fact that Dan's wife, Alicia, seemed to know about all their plans. Apparently, they had some sort of arrangement where each of them would have a different lover from time to time. Over the next few weeks, they made plans and schemed to put them into action. As soon as Dan was approved for a vacation, they set things up so that he would accidentally meet us at the pool. She would then find a way to spend time with him using me as a babysitter. Their ultimate plan was for her to spend every night in his room, and based on recent reports, that was supposed to start tonight. Worse, she had agreed to turn me down for the entire week. "What are you going to tell your husband?" he asked in one of the messages. "I'll tell him I'm getting my period," she wrote back. "He won't come near me while I'm on my period." "You know he's bound to suspect something," Dan texted her. "Not yet," she replied. "He'll know when you get pregnant," Dan texted. "Ha! He thinks boys are his too," she said in response. "But they aren't. I took a DNA test a year and a half ago to prove it. I'll email it to you." "Damn," he wrote back. "Why do you stay with him then?" "Because," she replied, "he's a good provider and great with the kids. Better yet, I don't have to worry about getting pregnant by him. After Robert was born, I talked him into having a vasectomy." "Do you know who the real fathers are?" he asked her. "I do," she replied. "The old boyfriend is John's father, and the doctor I used to work for is Robert's. He even gave Shane a vasectomy." Damn, I thought. I remembered that the doctor had left the clinic years ago to become some rich asshole at the teaching hospital in town. "You're something else," he said. "I hope he never finds out about this. Something tells me he'll kick you to the curb in no time." "He's a big teddy bear," she said. "Trust me, he won't do anything. I'll just let him know that if he divorces me, I'll destroy him financially and keep him away from the boys." "You're cold," he said. "Yes," she wrote. "The coldest. He hardly spoke to me at all this morning." "Maybe he's figured it out," Dan said. "No," she wrote back. "He doesn't understand anything as usual. Probably ate something." "Are we still on for tonight?" he asked. "Oh yeah," she replied. "I'll be at the pool like we agreed." "And how long are you going to stay?" asked Dan in response. "I should be back at the room around 8 in the morning or so," she said. "Then you have me all night. He wants to take us to the tar pits." Brea tar pits. "Boring." "Okay, I'll see you tonight," he said. "See you later, lover," she replied. Good thing Kay wasn't around at that moment. I had read stories where people said that the opposite of love was indifference, not hate. In my case, that wasn't the case. There was no indifference in me. It was, simply put, blind, seething hatred. The bitch had lied to me all these years and even robbed me of the opportunity to have a family of my own. I had to find out about the DNA test she was talking about, so I opened her cell phone email client and did a search. Sure enough, it was in a folder labeled Stuff. It was dated a little over a year and a half ago. I opened it and saw black and white proof of her perfidy. Somehow she had taken a sample from me and the boys. The test was unequivocal. Both boys were at best half-siblings with the same mother, but different fathers. The test showed that I could not be the father of either child. Annoyed beyond belief, I forwarded the document to my email and looked through the other emails she had saved. There were several of them, from Dan and other men, dating back about 8 years, just after Robert was born. Almost all of them were quite explicit, and some contained pictures and videos that I had forwarded to my account as well. I rummaged through her purse, which she had placed on the dresser. I found a package of birth control pills that didn't even have half of them in it. Why would she need these if I'm having a vasectomy? I asked myself. I found her day planner and looked through it. Kay has a habit of writing everything down, and I noticed a few days with DK written in red. Those must have been the days she dated Dan, I thought. 2 days before we left on vacation, I also found a notation that read, "Stop BC." Another marking read, "No S" on the same day. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. No doubt she had stopped taking birth control and cut me off from the fun. Why, I wondered. With my vasectomy, I couldn't get her pregnant. Maybe she was saving herself for Dan and wanted to make sure he was the one to get her pregnant. I took a picture of the planner and birth control bills and put everything back. I looked at her phone, wondering what else I could get out of it. And then an idea hit me. A while back, the company I worked for decided that one of their junior developers might be passing trade secrets to a competitor, so they used an app that tracked all activity on his cell phone, from SMS text messages to phone calls to emails. Another app was used to record and transcribe all calls, with the recording saved on the device and archived either locally or on another server. This was a bit tricky, as federal laws pertain to phone records. As I recall, the information could be accessed from any device with the proper credentials. It turned out that the rumors were unfounded, but the developer was rebuked for being careless about personal security and given a stern lecture before being transferred to another department. I created an account to track all activities on Kay's cell phone number, and within minutes was able to access everything using my phone, tablet, or personal computer. I installed an app to record and transcribe all phone conversations. I knew it couldn't be used in court, but I figured all's fair in love and war. And in my opinion, Kay had just declared war. The third thing I did was install a phone lookup app to keep track of where her phone was at all times. That way, I reasoned, I could keep track of her whereabouts, assuming she had her phone with her, of course. I also decided to get myself and the boys away from Kay, so I looked up flight information and called the reservation desk. I found out that the flight to Pittsburgh was scheduled to leave shortly before midnight, so I made arrangements. The flight would land in about 4.5 hours, but there was a 3-hour time difference between the two cities. That would give me time to pack my bags, get to the Los Angeles airport, and go through security. By the time Kay returned, we would be in our hometown. I called my relatives, hoping I'd have time to talk to them before they went to bed. Luckily, Kay's parents and I got along great. They considered me the son they never had, and I considered them my second mom and dad. Kay's mom, Julie, answered the phone on the second ring. "Hi, Mom," I said. "I'm sorry to call so late, but I have a big favor to ask of you." "Sure, Shane," Julie said. "Is everything okay on the West Coast?" "Not really, Mom," I said. "I'm bringing the kids home tonight and wondered if they could stay with you for a week. I'll explain when I get there." "Well, of course they can stay here," she said. "Is there something going on between you and Kay?" "Tina, I don't want to talk about it over the phone," I said. "But I promise to bring you up to speed when I get there. And whatever you do, please don't say anything about anything to Kay." "Okay, I promise," she said. Finished talking, I gathered my things and threw them into my suitcases. It took about 5 minutes, considering my anger. I went into the boys' room and shook them awake. "Come on, guys," I said. "Get up, we're leaving. You need to pack right now." They looked at me, scared and tired. "What's going on?" asked John. "It's an emergency," I said. "We're going home. You guys are going to spend the rest of the week with your grandparents. Now get up, move it." "Where's Mom?" asked Robert. "Isn't she coming?" "No, silly, she's with that Dan," said John. I looked at my 10-year-old son. Had he really seen something I had missed? "How do you know that?" I asked him. "She's been texting him all day today, Dad," he said. "Didn't you notice?" Honestly, my attention had been on them for most of our trip to Disneyland, but I remembered seeing her talking on the phone. "Yeah," I said. "Come on, get a move on, guys. We're leaving in a few minutes." I helped them pack up and then wrote a note for Kay, figuring she wouldn't see it until morning. "Kay, you weren't here when we got up this morning, so I took the kids out for the day. I might be late. I'll see you later, S," it said. I wondered if she would notice that I hadn't left a single affectionate word, but honestly, at that moment, I didn't care. I figured that if Kay stayed true to herself, she'd probably read the note and head back to Dan's without dignifying the place with a single glance. We picked up our luggage and headed to the front desk where I settled the bill and turned in my key card. I told the night manager that my wife was still in the room, and I didn't know how long she would be there. "I hope you enjoyed your stay with us," the girl said. "Yes, thank you," I replied. As we walked outside, I saw a van labeled Airport Shuttle and talked to the driver standing next to it. He got us into the van, loaded our luggage, and off we went. Turns out my timing was perfect. We got to the airline check-in counter, and my new reservation was confirmed. It took a while to get through security, but finally we were on the plane and headed to Pittsburgh. The boys were sound asleep within minutes of the plane taking off, but there was no way I was going to sleep. I pulled out my tablet and started researching Pennsylvania divorce law. Pennsylvania is a no-fault state, but state law does allow for divorces based on adultery or other reasons. The websites I looked at said that such divorces usually cost more and can take longer to resolve. As far as I could tell, I would have to pay child support. Part of me didn't mind, though, since I loved the boys I raised even though I wasn't their biological father. Our assets would be divided equally, but it looked like I would be able to avoid child support given the evidence of her years of cheating. It also looked like Kay would get physical custody of the boys, and I would become a weekend father to kids I had never raised. She'd probably get the house too, but I thought, maybe I could talk her into buying out my half of the mortgage. I knew how much she made, and mentally figured that if she budgeted carefully, she could get by, though it wouldn't be easy. In the end, I needed a really good lawyer, not just a paralegal filling in blank slips on pre-printed forms. I asked Cliff, my father-in-law, who happened to be a corporate lawyer, if he could recommend someone. I launched the Watcher app to see what was going on with Kay's phone. There was nothing new, but I saw that the app had finished archiving all the contents of her phone: text messages, photos, videos, emails, call logs, and more. I thought about going through it all again, but decided that for one 24-hour period, I was already grounded enough. I pondered for a while on what I could do to get back at the two cheaters. There was no way I was going to let this go unpunished. I remembered that Dan had said that he and his wife lived in Zanesville, so I searched and found the address, and phone number of one Daniel and Alicia King. I decided that since she knew what they were up to, nothing good would come of it. Exhausted, I turned off the tablet and leaned back in my chair, hoping to get some sleep before the plane landed. I woke up just as the plane began to descend into Pittsburgh. We disembarked with the rest of the passengers, packed our bags, and headed to the car. I called Cliff and Julie to let them know we were back and on our way to their place. I pulled up to their driveway and carried the boys' things to the door. Julie and Cliff greeted us, gave the boys a big hug, and escorted me inside. I set the boys' luggage on the floor, and Julie hugged me. "What's going on, son?" she asked. "I thought everything was okay between you and Kay." "I thought it was too," I said. "But I found out it was all a lie." "What do you mean?" asked Cliff. I pulled out my tablet and showed them the DNA test document from Kay's emails and her messages with Dan. "Oh my God," Julie said. "How could she have been so stupid?" "I'm sorry, Shane. I thought she outgrew all that stupidity after she married you." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Kay was a bit of a wild child in her younger years," she said. "It started in high school, and when she went to college, it only got worse. She was one of those girls you see on stage during spring break, taking off her clothes. She was constantly dating one guy and another. She was engaged for a while, but then they broke up. She told us they just drifted apart." "She never told me anything about that," I said. "Yeah, it was when she was in college," Julie said. "What was that guy's name?" she asked, turning to Cliff. "Oh yeah, Mike, something like that. Mike Jacques. They went to high school together. I think I still have a picture of them going to prom." She pulled a photo album from the shelf and opened it, flipping through a few pages. "Here it is," she said, showing me the picture. I looked at the picture of a much younger Kay and her date at the high school prom and immediately noticed something. Mike, her date, looked a lot like John. I showed the picture to Julie. "Is it just me, or does he look strikingly like John?" I asked. Julie and Cliff looked at the picture. "I think you're right," she said. "They look an awful lot alike, don't they, Cliff?" she asked, looking at her husband. He nodded his head. "Of course they look alike," Cliff said. He looked at me. "Do you think he could be John's biological father?" "It looks like it to me," I said. "But it would take a DNA test to prove it. Do you know if this guy is still in town?" "Yes," Julie said. "His family has owned a deli here for years. He makes the best pastrami. I think he still works there." She wrote something on a piece of paper and held it out to me. It was the name and general location of the deli. We'll have to pay this guy a visit, I thought to myself. I looked at Cliff. "Can you recommend a good divorce lawyer?" I asked. "I can," he replied. "Are you sure this is something you want to pursue?" "Absolutely," I said. "Kay has lied to me for the last 13 years, and now she's denied me my own children. Even now, she's copulating with some traveling salesman in a hotel room in California." "I understand, son," he said. "Look, I'm disgusted by what she did. You've been very good to her, and I think of you as my own son. But she's my daughter, and I still love her. Do what you need to do, but promise me one thing." "What's that?" I asked. "Promise me you won't physically hurt her," he said. I nodded my head. I realized what he was getting at. "I promise," I said. "Thank you," he said. "Also, we'd like you to come over for dinner tonight with us and the kids. I'd like us to sit down and talk about everything in detail." "I'll be here," I said. He pulled out his wallet and handed me a business card. "Marion Hawkins," it read with an address and phone number. "From what I've heard, she's the best in the business," he said. "I worked with her a few years ago. She hates crooks fiercely. I suggest you call her office early Monday morning." "Thanks," I said. "I'll see you tonight, and please don't let Kay know we're here." "Mom is the word," Julie said. We said goodbye and I hugged the boys, promising to come back tonight. I left and headed toward the place I used to call home. Without Kay and the boys, it seemed so dark, so empty. Everywhere I looked, everything brought thoughts of happier times. Tears came to my eyes at the realization that those happy times were gone forever, tainted by her lies and deceit. I wiped the tears away and headed upstairs to my bedroom, vowing never to cry over Kay again. As I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, I realized that I hadn't slept properly in almost 2 days. "God," I said to myself, "I look like shit." I brushed my teeth and crawled under the covers. I fell asleep almost as soon as my head touched the pillow. Kay. I walked into our hotel room at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning, hoping to see my husband and boys. I didn't know what to expect after the way Shane had treated me the day before, and honestly, I was a little scared. Thankfully, I had showered before leaving Dan's room this morning. The last thing I wanted was for Shane to smell my lover on me. I opened the door, expecting to be bombarded by the noise of 3 men getting ready for the workday. Or rather, 1 man and 2 restless boys. But instead, there was deathly silence. I wondered what was wrong and went into my room with Shane. He wasn't there, but I saw a note on the dresser. "Kay, you weren't here when we got up this morning, so I took the kids out for the day. I might be late. See you later." S, it read. Short, concise, and to the point. Just like my husband, I thought. I noticed that it didn't include the usual affectionate words he usually left. Not even a single "love you" or anything. Maybe he was still reeling from Friday night. Whatever, I thought. I decided there was no point in trying to call or text. Judging by his mood last night, it wouldn't do me any good. Besides, I told myself, I'm not interested in seeing a pile of tar anyway. I saw my phone on the dresser where I'd left it. As I picked it up and unlocked it, I noticed that the Messenger app was open. That's odd, I thought. I always close my apps when I finish work. Maybe I don't, though. I dialed Dan's number. "Hey, love," I said when he answered. "The Bone Man picked the guys up early this morning and says they might be back late tonight, so I'm at your disposal for tonight and tonight if you want." "Has he left already?" asked Dan. "Uh-huh," I said. "Apparently he got tired of waiting for me to show up and took off. His loss." "I'll meet you downstairs for breakfast then?" he asked. "How about we go to the pool from there and come back here for some fun?" "Will do, lover," I said. I couldn't wait. I grabbed a few things from the dresser and left. Shane. The clock was showing 1:30 p.m. when I finally opened my eyes. I must have been more tired than I thought. I got up, wiped my eyes from sleep, and headed to the bathroom. It was a good thing today was Sunday. There wasn't much I could do with the lawyer today, but I did have one very important thing on my agenda. I looked at my phone and noticed that Kay hadn't sent any texts or called to find out where we were. Figures. I wondered if she'd seen the note I'd left and decided to spend the day with Dickwad. After showering and getting dressed, I fired up my tablet and checked the activity on her phone. Sure enough, there was a new call, which meant she had to be in the hotel room reading the note I'd left. Judging from the log, the call was made to another cell phone with a 740 area code. Looking it up on the internet, I learned that it was one of 2 area codes for Zanesville, the town where Dan lived with his wife and 2 girls. I listened to the audio of the call and read the transcript provided by the app I had installed, and decided she would spend the day and night with Dan. Looking at her tracker data, I saw that the phone and presumably her were still at the hotel. I checked the map, found out where the deli where Mike Jacques worked was located, and headed there. I found the place easily, parked, and went inside. The man cutting meat on the counter behind the display case turned around as I stepped inside. He'd put on a couple pounds since high school and his blonde hair had thinned, but I knew it was him, Mike Jacques. It also helped that he wore a name tag that said, Mike. "What can I do for you, buddy?" he asked, smiling. Are you Mike Jacques? I asked. Depends on who you are, he said, still smiling. If you're a bill collector or from the IRS, no. I laughed. At least he has a good sense of humor, I thought. I'm not a bill collector, and I don't work for the IRS, I said. His smile widened and he held out his hand, taking off his gloves. Then I'm your man, he said. And who are you? Shane McKnight, I said. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, he said. What can I do for you? Well, 3 things actually, I said. Do you know Kay Williams? He nodded his head. Yeah, I did, he said. Back in high school and college. I heard she got married. Yeah, I said. She married me about 13 years ago. I see, he said, and the smile disappeared from his face. I understand you and she were once engaged, I said. He nodded his head. Yes, he said. But that was a long time ago. We were both in college at the time. If you don't mind me asking, what happened? I asked. Well, I caught her with another man, he said. I was hoping she'd keep her promise to be faithful, but apparently she couldn't, so I broke up with her. You took her to your high school prom, right? I asked. Yeah, a long time ago, he replied. Look, you didn't know her then. She was pretty wild. I thought she'd settle down as she got older, but I guess that didn't happen. Right. Do you remember seeing her about 11 years ago or so? I asked. His face turned red. Yeah, he said quietly. She came here to the deli around closing time and said she wanted to talk to me. I thought maybe she wanted to come back to me, but I saw her wedding rings and changed my mind. She said she wanted to make amends for what she did to me in college. She said she wanted me to get her pregnant. I asked her about her husband. I think it was you. And she said you enjoyed her having fun with other men. Said it was a game the 2 of you played together. Not exactly like that, I said. I see, he said back. Doesn't go too well with that ring, does it? I asked, looking at the wedding band he was wearing. He looked at it for a moment before answering. I wasn't married yet at the time, he said. I met my wife about 6 months after that day. Did you ever hear back from Kay? I asked. Yes, he replied. She came and said she had a baby boy, named him Jim or something. John, I said. I pulled out my phone and showed him a picture of John. Striking resemblance, don't you think? Yeah, he said. Pretty boy. I guess you want to mess with me now, right? I shook my head. It's a little late for that, I said. But there is something you can do for me. What's that? He asked. Are you willing to testify in court? I asked. To tell the judge what you just told me? Maybe swear an oath? I suppose I could do that, he said. After all, it looks like she was playing both of us. It does, I said. Besides, would you be willing to undergo DNA testing to make sure you're John's biological father? Are you planning on coming to me for support or something? He asked nervously. I shook my head. I don't know what the court will rule, I said. My name is on the birth certificate, and I've been raising him for the last 10 years. I don't know what Kay or her lawyer will do. He thought for a moment before answering. Okay, he said. I'll do it. What do I need to do? I pulled out a plastic bag with a cotton swab. Just let me take some saliva from your cheek, I said. I'll take it from there. He opened his mouth, and I slipped the Q-tip into his mouth. I put the cotton swab back in the bag, made a mark on it, and put it back in my pocket. There's something else, I said. What? He asked. I'll have a pound of your pastrami, please, I said. I'll pay for it. His face spread into a huge grin. I see you have good taste, he said. You know, we make the best pastrami in the state. So I've heard, I said. He held out a small piece for me to sample. It was, without a doubt, the best pastrami I had ever tasted. Very tasty, I said. If you'd like, I'll add a sandwich for you at no extra charge, he said. Sounds good, Mike, I said. Please do. I haven't had lunch yet. He weighed out a pound of meat, put it in a bag, and took more meat and made the sandwich, wrapping it in paper after he was done. I thanked him, paying for the pastrami. Shane, you seem like a real professional, he said. I'm really sorry about that, and I hope it works out for you. Thanks, Mike, I said. And thanks for your honesty. I'll see you around. See ya, he said as I walked out. I drove home, taking a few bites from my sandwich as I went. I had another important item on my agenda. I put the packaged meat in the fridge and finished the sandwich Mike had made for me. Pulling out my tablet, I checked to see if there was any new activity on Kay's phone since this morning. There wasn't. She didn't even seem to be interested in whether the boys and I were okay. I decided to go through her emails and messages again to see what else I could find. I started at the beginning and found several exchanges between her and Dr. Winstead, the doctor who performed my vasectomy. He made it clear to her that he didn't want to know anything about the baby he was carrying and asked if she had contacted me about the vasectomy, as he had suggested. Yes, I have, she answered him. And he was fine with it. I told him I was having a hard time with Robert, which I did, and he would do anything to make me feel better. Good, he replied. I'll take care of it myself. Trust me, he won't be able to have kids when I'm done. Just curious, why don't you want to have kids with your husband? Really? She asked. Have you looked at him? Do you think I want to have children with him? No way. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My so-called loving wife and this doctor were conspiring to make me infertile while making me believe I was doing it for her. And the thought that she really didn't want children with me pierced me to the core. Why did she even marry me if she had those feelings? And I went through some more of her emails and pulled up some pictures and videos of her cheating. I copied it all onto a flash drive to use in the divorce. I continued going through her emails and found that after good old Dr. Winstead left the clinic, she had dates with at least 5 other men. Judging by the dates on the emails, many of her affairs had taken place while I was away from home. Of course, I didn't travel much for work, but I did have to go out a few times to oversee software upgrades on old avionics or to observe test flights of new equipment we were developing. Mostly, I had to travel 3 or 4 times a year. Then she met Dan, and things changed dramatically. It turned out that Dan and his wife were into an unusual club and wanted to get Kay and me involved as well. Kay told them that I would never agree to that, and they decided to keep the affair between the 3 of them going. I sat there wondering how I might not have noticed this before. Had I been so blinded by my love for her that I just hadn't noticed it? How much longer would this betrayal have gone on if I hadn't found out? Worse, how would I have explained it to the boys? I had always told them that honesty was always best, even if it hurt. I knew one day I'd have to tell them that. Damn her, I thought. Damn her to hell. I looked at the clock and realized that I would have to leave soon to have dinner with the boys and my in-laws. I showered again, feeling dirty after looking at Kay's emails and messages. Once I got home, I rang the doorbell and Cliff answered it. He invited me in and the boys immediately bustled around me. God, I love those boys so much. I wish I was their biological father. We all sat down at the table and enjoyed our dinner, and then retired to the family room. Dad, John said, getting my attention, are you and Mom getting a divorce? I nodded my head. I'm afraid so, son, I told him. Did I do something? He asked with tears in his eyes. I pulled him close to me. I'll make it up to you, I promise. No, son, I told him. You haven't done anything. You're both the best sons anyone could wish for. Then why? He asked. Don't you love Mom anymore? It's hard to explain, son, I told him. Sometimes moms and dads go through things that can't be fixed. This is one of those times. But remember that I love you, and I always will. And I'll always be there for you, okay? I hugged both boys for a while and comforted them. But they knew things would never be the same in our family again. Listen, I said. Why don't you guys go upstairs and get ready for bed? I need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa for a little while, okay? Okay, they said as they left the room. I waited until they were gone and pulled out my tablet. I spent the next hour telling Cliff and Julie what I knew so far. I showed them all the text messages and emails, even photos and videos. They were clearly outraged at the way their daughter had behaved, but watched the videos anyway. It looks like she's been doing this to me our entire marriage, I told them. That explains what happened last summer, Julie said. What do you mean? I asked. Last summer when you were at Edwards for a week, Kay brought the boys over and asked if they could stay the night, she said. She told me she was going to a girl's birthday party at her office and thought she might stay late. We didn't see her until Sunday afternoon. I remembered that trip. I needed to oversee the testing of new software and ended up being gone for a week. I looked through my tablet and found emails from that time between Kay, Dan, and Alicia. It turned out that she had spent the weekend with them, having a 2-day vacation. I showed the emails to Cliff and Julie. I'm so sorry, son, Cliff finally said. You deserve so much better than this. You've been a wonderful husband and father. Thanks, Dad, I said. I'm sorry to drag you into all this. But as you can see, there's no way I can stay with Kay. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of calling Marion, he said. She told me that if you can come to her office at 7:30 in the morning, she'll see you right away. Thanks, I said. I'll be there. Be sure to bring it all with you, along with your financial documents, he said. If anyone can help you get through this, it's her. Just don't do anything stupid. I won't, I promise, I said. What are you going to do about biological fathers? He asked. I shook my head. I don't know. I said quietly. I met Mike today. He seems like a nice enough guy and was honest enough to tell me the whole story. I think he was played as much as I was, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do about Dr. Winstead. Yes, I've met him several times at the country club, Cliff said. He's a cocky son of a bitch. I'd like to see you rein him in. I laughed. I'd like that too, I said. I looked at the clock and realized I had a lot to do before I went to bed. I better get going, I told them. If you don't mind, I'd like to say goodnight to the boys. Good idea, Julie said. I left the room and went upstairs. The boys were in bed, but not yet asleep. I hugged them, told them I loved them, and promised I'd see them soon. I said goodnight to Cliff and Julie and headed home, where I set about gathering all of our financial information. I printed out everything that was out there and put it in a folder along with the most damning emails. I also copied pictures and videos onto a flash drive. One last time I checked to see if there was any activity on her cell phone, and seeing nothing, I decided to call it a day. I couldn't believe that she hadn't even bothered to text me to see if everything was okay with the boys. The next day, Monday, I got up early, noticed that Kay still hadn't bothered to text or call, showered, shaved, got dressed, and headed to Marion's office. I met her at the office door at 7:30. Mr. McKnight, I presume, she said as she opened the door to her office. Please call me Shane, I said. You must be Miss Hawkins. Actually, it's Mrs. Hawkins, but you can call me Marion, she said. I see you got your father-in-law's message. I did, I told her. And he told me you were the best at what you do. I am, she said. My secretary won't be here for another half hour, so let me get us each a cup of coffee and we'll get started. Sounds good, I said. She made each of us a cup of coffee from the Keurig coffee maker in the reception area and escorted me into her office. Mr. Williams, your father-in-law, tells me you want a divorce. Is that true? She asked. Yes, it is, I replied. Good, she said. Tell me what's going on. I brought her up to speed, leaving nothing out. I showed her the emails, the text messages, the DNA form, and handed her a thumb drive with photos and videos. And you say you haven't heard from her since you left California on Saturday night? She asked. Nothing, I said. Not one text, not one phone call, nothing. Well, she said, it won't look too good in the eyes of the court. You say you've identified the biological fathers of both boys? Yes, I said, telling her about my meeting with Mike. I see, she said. Well, you should know that divorce isn't about justice, unfortunately. It's usually about money. In most cases, the mother almost always gets custody, and the father always pays child support as well as spousal support. All of your assets are usually split in half, and the house usually goes to the custodian. Pennsylvania is a no-fault state, she added. However, the law allows for divorce based on adultery. I assume that's what you're looking for. It is, I said. We'll have to prove it to a judge, but from what you've shown me, I think we have a compelling argument, she said. Based on that, we can ask that spousal support not be awarded. However, you would still have to pay alimony. It depends on a formula that takes into account many factors. Even if I'm not the biological father? I asked. You raised the children as your own for 10 years, she said. But that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. You said Junior's father is Dr. Robert Winstead? Yes, I said. Suddenly it hit me. My youngest boy's name is Robert. That bitch named him after his real father. You say he's the one who gave you a vasectomy after he talked your wife into giving you one, Marion said. Yes, I said. Is that significant? Probably, she said thoughtfully. Let me work with that for a while. In the meantime, I'll draw up a petition whereby she gets physical custody of the boys and you get joint custody. That's probably what the court will decide anyway. I will also ask for a basic minimum of child support and no spousal support. I would also give her the option to buy out your half of the house. There is also a possibility that the court may order you to go to counseling. Would that interest you? No, I said. She lied to me from the beginning and robbed me of the opportunity to have a family. Nothing will ever make me reconcile with her. I understand, she said. However, depending on the judge, you may still be ordered to go to counseling. I'm just letting you know that it's a possibility. I nodded my head in understanding. What about DNA testing? I asked. We already have the results of the test your wife got, she said. But I can see how additional testing to confirm paternity might be helpful. By all means, have it done if you'd like. We talked some more, and she gave me a list of things to help protect myself financially. After making all her notes, she stopped and looked at me. When do you want it serviced? She asked. As soon as possible, I replied. You say the hotel room in California is booked through Friday? She asked. Yes, but she can come back anytime, I said. As far as I know, she still doesn't know I've left. I see, she said. Good. We plan to serve her when she gets to the airport. If you find out she's coming back early, call me on my cell phone. If I don't answer, it'll be because I'm in court, so just leave a message. In the meantime, don't do anything stupid. Let me take care of this. I know it's hard for you, but you have to be strong for your two boys. Thank you, I said. Is there anything else we need to talk about? Not right now, she said. But please contact me if you hear from her. I will, I said. So, how much do I owe you? I blushed when she told me that, but I knew it was necessary. I wrote out a check and handed it to her. We said our goodbyes and I walked out the door feeling a little better. I still hated Kay, but at least I was doing something about it. On the way home, I stopped by the bank and made the changes to our account that Marion had advised. I withdrew half of all the money and opened a new account in my name only, and then paid off and closed the joint credit cards. However, one I ordered just for myself. I also knew that Kay had her own card in her name that was not linked to the joint account, although I paid for it from our joint checking account. By the time I got home, it was almost 11 a.m., 8 o'clock California time, and I figured if Kay was going to call, she'd do it soon. Kay. At 8 a.m. Monday morning, I walked into our room. I paused before entering the room, not knowing what I would find there. I hadn't heard from him yesterday, and I was a little worried about the boys. I knew they were safe with Shane, but it would be nice to hear something. I slid the keycard into the slot and opened the door, hearing the latch unlock. When I entered the house, it was eerily quiet. Almost too quiet. Where were they? I hadn't seen them at the restaurant. Had they already left for the day? I called out to them, but no one answered. I went into the boys' room and saw that both beds were made. I didn't see the usual mess of toys and clothes and wondered what was going on. When I opened the closet, I got the shock of my life. All of their clothes were gone. I opened the drawers of the dresser, and everything was gone there too. In a panic, I ran to our room and opened the closet door. All of Shane's stuff was gone too. I looked at the dresser and saw that the note he had left Saturday night had never moved. Opening the drawers of the dresser, I saw that everything was gone. Oh my God, I thought. He knows. I pulled out my cell phone and called. Hi, Shane said when he was answered. Honey, it's me, I said. Where are you? Is everything okay with the boys? What's going on? Like you care, he said. You could hear the anger in his voice. Of course I care, I said. I love you and I miss you. Ha! He exclaimed. Is that why you waited 36 hours to contact me? What? Were you too busy having fun with Dan to notice that the boys and I weren't here? What are you talking about? I knew the boys would be safe with you and I know how much you hate using your phone, I said. Bullshit, he stated. You realized I was going to be gone, so you decided to spend the day and night with your buddy. Don't lie to me again, bitch. I know everything. What do you mean everything? I asked. I was starting to get a little nervous. How much does he really know? I mean everything, slut, he said. I found the results of your DNA test, and I know the boys aren't mine. I know who their real fathers are, and I know how you schemed to keep me from ever having children. You lied to me our entire marriage. Even this vacation was just an excuse to have fun with Dan for a week. Shane, it's not what you think, I said, trying to get him off balance. It wasn't working. You don't have to tell me that, you worthless cheating whore, he said. You deliberately plotted and schemed to deprive me of my family. And you know what? It's over now. We're done, whore. We're done. I've already seen a lawyer about a divorce. Divorce? I asked. No, please, Shane. I don't want a divorce. I don't care what you want anymore, he said. Shane, please let me come home and we can talk this out like adults, I said. I realize you're angry right now, but we can work this out. There's nothing to settle, slut, he said. The room is paid for through Friday, so you can stay there. You'll be handed the papers when you get back. By the way, you should know that I canceled your joint credit card and debit card, but you still have your personal card. Shane, please, I started, but he was already done talking. I stood and stared at the phone, contemplating whether or not I should call back. Figuring it wouldn't do any good, I decided not to call. The more I thought about what he said, the angrier I got. Yes, I had cheated on Shane over the years. Many times. I had always been a little wild, and I thought things would change when I got married. I stayed faithful to Shane for the first 2 years of our marriage, but the old desires started to come back. Around this time, we started talking about starting a family, and I made a unilateral decision that changed everything, at least for me. I decided to let Mike, my ex-fiancé, get me pregnant. I justified it to Mike by saying that I owed it to him. Yes, I lied a little when he asked me about my husband, but the truth was that I never really wanted kids with Shane. It's not that he was ugly or anything. He's no Quasimodo, but he's certainly no Brad Pitt, if you know what I mean. It wasn't easy for me at first, and I did my best to keep Shane from finding out. I usually waited until he was away on one of his trips, so I would have time to enjoy myself and get cleaned up. It wasn't easy since he only went away a few times a year. I had a few more lovers after John was born, but I always made sure Shane didn't find out. I started using some of my free time to spend my days with different men. Some of my lovers took pictures and made videos, sending them to me as keepsakes. A couple of years after Mike, I started having an affair with Dr. Winstead, one of my bosses at work. I ended up getting pregnant with Robert. Yes, I named the boy after his real father, even though he wanted nothing to do with his offspring. I took a chance that Shane wouldn't find out, and so far my secret was safe. Dr. Winstead advised me to give Shane a vasectomy after Robert was born. I thought it was a dishonest idea and suggested it to my clueless husband. He bought my lie and agreed to the vasectomy, and I made sure Dr. Winstead performed the procedure. After Robert was born, I dated several men again, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. I never denied Shane anything and promised myself I wouldn't disrespect him by giving him sloppy seconds. As long as he remains in the dark, I thought, everything will be okay. Somewhere along the way, I met Mac. It's not his real name, of course, but that's what everyone calls him. We slept together a few times, after which he made me an offer that promised to be very lucrative. Everything we did was for cash, and by now I had managed to amass a good amount of capital. I decided to use it as a backup in case Shane suddenly decided to leave me. Yes, some of what I was doing for Mac was outside the law, but he assured me that everything would be okay if I kept my cool. Around the same time that I met Mac, I decided to verify that neither of the boys were Shane's father and took a DNA test. I was pleased with the result and decided to keep the document for future reference. I knew the time would come when I would have to tell my husband the truth. I knew he would be shocked, but I didn't care. After all, what could he do? Put the babies back in my womb? I know some would think me evil for denying Shane children, but I decided it was my right to decide who would be the father to my offspring. As I thought Shane's reaction to what he found out was over the top. We'd been through a lot over the years, and I saw no reason why it should be any different. In my wildest dreams, I never thought he would actually go through with the divorce. In the past, he had always deferred to me. Until Friday night, I had never seen him get angry or really upset about anything. But the more I thought about the fact that he called me a slut, the angrier I got. Yes, I'm a slut. But, I asked myself, how dare he call me that? I'll show him, I thought to myself. He thinks I'm a slut. I'll show him what a slut I can be. A plan began to form in my head. What the hell, I thought to myself. And then another thought hit me. Shane had said he knew everything, and that really bothered me. If he really does know everything, like he said, I could end up in jail. I opened my contact list and made another call. McGregor, a male voice said. Mac, I answered. It's me, Kay. Hi, Kay, he said. How's California? Having a good tan? Yeah, fun, I said. We've got a problem. Shane knows. He said he knows everything. Shit, Mac said. Part 2. Shane. I had just finished talking to Kay, deciding I couldn't take any more of her stamps and bullshit. I waited a few minutes and checked that the app I had installed on her phone Saturday night had downloaded the audio file along with a transcript of the conversation. I noticed that she was in the middle of a conversation with some number in the local Pittsburgh area. I didn't recognize the number and looked in her contacts. Sure enough, it was registered to a person named Mac. I waited for the conversation to end and gave the app time to copy the audio file and transcript to the cloud. After about half an hour, I saw that they were both available. I opened the transcript and printed it out so I could read it while listening to the conversation. Sitting down at my desk again with the transcript in hand, I opened the audio file and pressed the play button. McGregor, said a male voice. Mac, Kay replied. It's me, Kay. Hi, Kay, McGregor said. How's California? Having a good tan? Yeah, fun, she answered him. We've got a problem. Shane knows. He said he knows everything. Shit, Mac said. We talked about this, Kay said. You know what needs to be done. Are you sure? Said McGregor. Absolutely, she told him. And it has to be done Thursday night. Why Thursday? He asked. For two reasons, she replied. First, I'm going to send him something late tonight. He probably won't see it until tomorrow. He'll be so upset he probably won't even want to defend himself. Second, I'll be here until Friday, and if I know him, he'll probably serve me with divorce papers as soon as I land in Pittsburgh. Divorce? Asked McGregor. Yes, she said. He found out about me and said he's preparing divorce papers. And what are you going to do to make him so upset? He asked. He thinks I'm a whore, she told him. And I'm going to show him what a slut I really am. McGregor laughed. Well, you are a slut, aren't you? He asked her. She giggled. Yeah, but he has no idea what a slut I can be, she said. So it has to happen Thursday night and look like a home invasion. We've had to deal with quite a few cases like this lately, so it's doable, he said. Was this guy a police officer? I asked myself. Tell me, does he have a gun in the house? No, she answered. He wanted to acquire one, but I never allowed it. Good. What about rats? He asked her. I really don't want them to get hurt, she said. But there must be no witnesses. Understood? Yes, he said. I understand. What's in it for me? Shane has $1 million life insurance policy, and his employer has a $500,000 policy, she said. I'll give you $100,000 of that amount. You're asking for a lot, he said. Let it be $250,000, and we'll make a deal. Okay, she said after a few moments. So, let me get this straight, he said. You want me to kill your husband and possibly your two boys for $250,000. You want it done this Thursday night, and you want it to look like a home invasion. Exactly, she said. And I want you to handle it yourself. I know you've done it before, and I don't want someone else to mess it up. There's too much at stake. I understand, he said. You realize I'm taking a risk. We both do, she said. Good, he told her. But I want to celebrate when you get back. She giggled. Sure, she said. We can celebrate D-Day together. D-Day? He asked. Yes, she told him. The day Shane died. They laughed. I've got to go. I won't call until I get back. Don't worry, I'll act like a distraught widow and no one will ever know the truth. Okay, he said. I'll text you when it's ready. I can't wait, she said. We'll talk later. Bye, he said, and ended the conversation. I sat there stunned, unable to believe what I had just heard. My so-called loving wife had just promised to pay some asshole $250,000 to get me, and possibly the boys killed this Thursday night. Why the hell did she get into this? I asked myself. And who is this McGregor guy? What is he? A cop? And what are they doing so bad that me and the boys have to be destroyed? I sent the audio file and transcript to Marion's email address and called her when I was sure the email had been sent. She answered on the second ring. Marion Hawkins, she said when she answered. Marion, this is Shane McKnight, I said. I just sent you a couple files. I intercepted a conversation between Kay and some guy named McGregor, and they just plotted to destroy me and the boys this Thursday. What? She asked, shocked. Are you sure about that? I'm absolutely sure of it, I said. I sent you the audio file and the transcript. How did you get the audio file and the transcript? She asked. Never mind, you can explain it later. I just finished a case and I'm on my way to the office now. I want you to come in right now. I'll clear my calendar, call the DA's office and my private investigator. On my way, I said, ending the conversation. Grabbing my tablet and laptop, as well as a printout of the transcript just in case, I hit the road. When I got to Marion's office, I noticed that two men were next to her, reviewing the transcript. Marion waved me over and closed the door. She introduced them to me. Bill Rollins was her private investigator, and the other man was Ryan Jacobs, an assistant district attorney. Can you tell me how you got this? Asked Ryan. I told him about the apps I had installed on Kay's phone, one that archived all the data from her device, including emails, text messages, videos, and photos, and another that recorded her calls and stored them in the cloud as audio files. It also decrypted her calls, saving the text files in a remote location. I'm not sure we can use this as evidence in court, given the way you got it, he told me. Look, Mr. Jacobs, I said. The phones and services are in my name and I pay the bills. That's why I don't use my phone for anything other than making calls. Are you willing to testify under oath? He asked me. Absolutely, I said. I'll even give you access to everything I have so you can review it all for yourself. I need to talk to my boss about it first, he said. Do you even know who this McGregor guy is? I shook my head. Not directly, I said. I know Kay had an affair with him a couple years ago, judging from her emails. He even sent her some pictures and videos. Show me, he said. I pulled out my laptop and, using the Wi-Fi in Marion's office, logged into the cloud account where Kay's phone was archived. I went into the stuff folder and found the emails. In one of the emails was a rather long video of her having fun with this guy. We watched until we came across a frame that clearly showed his face. Shit, Bill said. I know that guy. Who is he? I asked. That's Alfred McGregor, he said. He's one of Pittsburgh's finest, captain of the police department. Are you sure about that? Asked Ryan. Absolutely, said Bill. Ryan stared at the frame for a few seconds. I think you're right, he said. Can you print this out? He asked Marion. She nodded her head. Give me a second to plug this laptop into my desktop printer, she said, and grabbed a USB cable. Soon we had a color picture of McGregor with Kay. Ryan looked at me before he spoke again. Can you give me access to all this information? He asked. I can, I replied. Do you have a laptop? He nodded, then opened his bag and pulled out a computer. He started it up and connected to Marion's Wi-Fi. In no time at all, I had it set up to watch everything that was going on. I think it would be best if we put Mr. McKnight in protective custody until we get this all sorted out, he said to Marion. She shook her head and rejected his suggestion. No way, she said. First of all, he has 2 little boys to take care of. Second, if you put my client in protective custody, you'll be signing his death warrant. There's no way I'm going to let you put him in a position where this McGregor can get a hold of him. I have a couple guys I can spare to guard him, Bill said. Marion nodded her head. Do it, she said. Ryan looked back at me before he spoke again. Do you have any idea why they want to destroy you? He asked. I pulled out my laptop and showed them the emails I'd found between Kay and Alfred. I don't know what any of this means, I said. But I found this by looking through her emails. They went through all the emails I'd brought, and as I watched them, Ryan's eyes widened. Holy shit, he said. What? Asked Marion. Our office has been working with the Drug and Alcohol Administration on the increasing cases of prescription drugs on the black market. They're trying to find the source, but so far they've had no luck, he said. He looked at me. Where does your wife work? He asked. I told him about her work at the clinic. You think my wife is the source of these drugs? I asked. That's exactly what these emails indicate, he said. It looks like McGregor is involved in this case too. If your wife thinks you know about all this, she'll probably want you out of the way. He turned to Marion again. Are you sure you don't want to take your client into protective custody? To make it easier for McGregor to get to him? She asked. Hell no. I want McGregor behind bars immediately. It's not that easy, Ryan said. We need to go through channels, get internal affairs involved, investigate. We're talking about a police captain, not some rookie. It's going to take time. We don't have time for your political bullshit, Marion said angrily. By the time you go through normal channels, I'll already be on Social Security and my client will be dead. We know McGregor plans to take him down on Thursday. That gives us less than 3 days. What do you want me to do? Asked Ryan. Call your boss right now, she said. He's probably at lunch right now, said Ryan. I know he's there, Marion said. He's probably on his way back to his car right now. Call him and put him on speakerphone. Ryan nodded his head and pulled out his cell phone. He put it on speaker and placed the phone on Marion's desk. Giles, the man said as he picked up the phone. Boss, this is Ryan Jacobs, Ryan said. I'm with Marion Hawkins and her client, and it seems we have a problem. Oh, asked Giles. What kind of problem? Can't it wait until I get back to the office? I just finished lunch. Ryan looked at Marion, who grinned back with a disgusted smirk on her face. Not exactly, Marion said. We have evidence that one of our esteemed police captains may be involved in a murder-for-hire scheme and a plot to distribute stolen drugs. Who is this police captain, Marion? Asked Giles. McGregor, said Ryan. Al McGregor. No way, said Giles. He's one of our highest-ranking officers. I can't believe he could be involved in something like this. We have some pretty compelling evidence, boss, said Ryan. What kind? Asked Giles. A recorded phone conversation, as well as a slew of incriminating emails, said Ryan. Shit, said Giles. We don't have time for political crap, Giles, said Marion. According to what we have, the murder is supposed to happen Thursday night, and it involves children. Shit, Giles said. You already said that, Giles, Marion said. And what are you going to do about it? Fine, Giles said. Ryan, let Jenkins take over your business for a couple days. I want you to work only on this and bring me a solid case in 48 hours. Can you do that? Can do it, Ryan said. Keep that to yourself, Giles said. In the meantime, I'll put a bug in the chief's ear and we'll alert IA. If there's anything to it, we'll get it off the street as soon as possible. Will that satisfy you, counselor? For now, Marion said. But so help me, Giles. If anything happens to my client and his kids, I'm going to make such a fuss you won't believe it. And you can kiss your re-election goodbye. Don't worry, Marion, Giles said. I'll do my job. I hope so, Giles, she said. I really hope so. Ryan finished talking and gathered his gear. I'd better get started right now, he said. We definitely need to issue a warrant for your wife's arrest. You say she's due back on Friday? I nodded my head. Good. I'll take care of getting this message to California so the locals can pick her up. Can I have your number in case I need more information? He asked. I nodded my head, wrote down my number and home address on a piece of paper and handed it to him. He thanked me, tucking the piece of paper into his pocket. One last thing, he said. We'll need to search your house. I'll get a search warrant and call you when we're ready to come. I understand, I said. He nodded his head, shook my hand, and walked away. I guess that changes things with your divorce, Marion said after Ryan left. You think so? I asked sarcastically. I'm sorry, I said, seeing her reaction. The whole thing really pissed me off. It's not your fault. It's okay, Shane, she said. I'd be a little pissed off too if I were you. So, I take it you want custody in the house? Yes, I said. I doubt she'll be able to pay child support while in jail. I doubt it myself, she said. We'll figure something out. Just go take care of your kids, okay? I nodded my head. I will, I said. Bill came back into the room and turned to me. Do you have a security system in your house? He asked. I nodded my head. Yes, we do, I told him. Good, he said. What about security bars on the windows? No, I said. I've never been interested in them. I understand, he said. But I think under the circumstances you should have them, as well as armored doors. I have a contractor who can install them for you. You can take them off later if you want, when this is all over. Okay, I said, thinking for a moment. If anything, I figured it would slow McGregor down for a minute or two. Just in case, I'll assign a man to patrol the outside of your house, as well as a man inside, he said. I nodded my head. I'll also send a couple people over to McGregor's place to see what we can find out. I'd be able to handle it myself, but he knows me, and will spot me in no time. That makes sense, I said. I won't be home for a while. I need to go visit the boys. No problem, he said. Live your life as usual. Just be extra observant. Thanks, I will, I said. Listen, if you hear from Kay or McGregor, let me know immediately, Marion said. I don't care what time of day or night. I will, I said before I left. I headed over to Cliff and Julie's house to see the boys and get some dinner. It had been a long day, and I knew it was only going to get worse from here. Julie had lasagna ready and set it out for me when I arrived. Cliff and I talked while I ate. What's the word, Shane? He asked. I told him about the threat against me and the boys. He shook his head when I told him about the phone conversation between Kay and McGregor. Well, the boys are safe here, he said. Do you have a gun? He asked. No, I answered. Kay would never let me buy one. Said she was afraid of them. Nonsense, he said. Wait. He got up and returned a few minutes later with a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. Do you know how to use one of those? He asked. I was in the Marines for 4 years, I told him. 4 years in a row was qualified. My dad has a shotgun very similar to this one. Good, Cliff said. It's fully loaded with rock salt. Not lethal, but it'll sting like hell. Take it and use it if you need to. What about you? I asked. He laughed. I have 2 more of these and an AR-15, he said. We're protected. Thanks, I said. Anytime, he said. Look, son, I can't tell you how sorry I am that all this happened. It's not your fault, I told him. You didn't make her do what she did. I just don't know how I'm supposed to explain it to the boys. Explain what, Dad? I heard John question from the doorway. I gestured for him to come over and then hugged him as tightly as I could. John, I said, I've never lied to you boys, and I'm not about to start now. You should know that you may hear some very bad things about your mother in the next few days. She cheated on you, didn't she? He asked. I nodded my head slowly. How do you convey to your young children that their mother is a whore? Yes, son, she cheated, I said. I hate her, he exclaimed, tears streaming from his eyes. No, son, you should never say that, I told him. She's done some bad things, and she'll have to pay for it, but she's still your mother. But you hate her, he said. I can tell. Damn, I thought. How do you explain something like that to a 10-year-old boy? The thing is, he was right. At that moment, I hated her with every fiber of my being. It's different, son, I told him. What your mother did, she did on purpose to hurt me. But if she hurt you, didn't she hurt Robbie and me too? He asked. He was right again, and I was confused. She's hurting all of us, I said. I don't think she fully realizes it yet, but she will realize it. In time, son, she'll realize. John wrapped his arms around me and buried his face in my shoulder. I could feel his tears as he cried. I love you, son, I said, and I always will. I love you too, Daddy, he said. I hugged him for what seemed like an eternity. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and saw Ryan's number on the screen. We're ready to go search your house, Mr. McKnight, he said when I answered. Thanks, Ryan, I said. I'm on my way. I sat John down and explained that I had to go home. By then, Robert had walked into the room. I hugged the boys, kissed them goodbye, and shook Cliff's hand. Julie hugged me at the door. I promised to bring them up to speed the next time I saw them, and left with shotgun in hand. I got home just as Bill's contractors were putting the finishing touches on the security bars covering the windows. They had also installed the armored doors, and the foreman handed me the keys. I signed the paperwork agreeing to pay for the installation and put it on my credit card. I was somewhat surprised. The ornate iron bars looked better than I thought they would, but I still wasn't sure I wanted to keep them after it was over. I walked into the house, unloaded the shotgun, and set it against the wall in the home office, next to the computer. I put the shell casings in the desk drawer and kept the barrel open so it couldn't be mistaken for a loaded shotgun. When I was done, Ryan and a few officers showed up. I let them in, and one of them introduced himself as a DEA agent. Ryan showed me a search warrant, and they started searching. They looked around but were careful to put everything back where it belonged. After about an hour, I heard someone calling from upstairs. Found something, boss, one of the officers said. I wondered what they could have found as I followed Ryan up the stairs. We walked into the room that Kay used as the craft and sewing room. The closet door was open, and the bookcase she used to store her needlework stuff was pushed back from the wall. Behind it, there was a cutout in the wall where two rather large metal boxes stood. Ryan looked at me before he spoke. Did you know this was in here? He asked. I shook my head. I have no idea, I said. I usually stay out of this room out of respect for Kay. Ryan put on a pair of latex gloves and opened the first box. Inside were pill bottles and sachets, similar to the samples you might get at a doctor's office. They were labeled Acme Medical. Ryan looked at me. Isn't that the company your wife's boyfriend works for? He asked. Yes, it is, I replied. The DEA agent looked at the pills and read the labels. These appear to be all Schedule II controlled drugs, he said. We'll have to run tests to verify that, but it looks like she has several drugs here. He looked at Ryan. We need to pay a visit to that clinic. Ryan nodded his head. I agree, he said. Opening the second box, we saw several wads of crisp $100 bills. Ryan counted the wads and then turned to me. Looks like your wife has been very busy, he said. I'd estimate she has about $120,000 here. I shook my head in shock. In the box, we also saw an envelope. Ryan pulled it out and looked inside. There was a statement from a local bank saying that she had another $150,000 stashed away in a savings account. It looked like she'd been making deposits regularly for the last year and a half, careful not to exceed the $10,000 limit. It looks like she structured her deposits. Were you aware of that? He asked. I understood the basic idea of structuring, where people intentionally segregate cash deposits to avoid being subject to mandatory reporting. I'd heard stories of business owners caught doing this, and from what I'd heard, some of them had lost all their money and were facing several years in jail. No idea, I said. Ryan handed the boxes to a technician who checked them for fingerprints. Ryan looked around some more and saw Kay's laptop on her desk. We're going to have to confiscate that, he said. I nodded my head in understanding. And this, he added, opening one of the desk drawers and seeing several folders of papers I'd never seen before. In one of the drawers was a key I had never seen before. It looked like a mailbox key. Ryan picked it up and examined it closely before placing it in a plastic bag. After looking around some more, he led me out of the room and spoke to me privately. Shane, I'm afraid we're going to have to designate this room as a crime scene, he said. We'll seal the door when we're done, and I don't want anyone going in there until we're done. Do what you have to do, I said. From what I've seen, this could become a federal case, since it looks like her boyfriend was transporting the stuff across at least one state line, he said. You could have the FBI coming after you. What about McGregor? I asked. Well, if we find his fingerprints on any of this stuff, I'd say we have a strong case against him, he said. We'll see. In the meantime, stay out of trouble and let us know if anything happens. I will, I said. A couple hours later, everyone except Bill and one of his investigators left, carrying boxes full of Kay's stuff. I just got a text from my guy on the ground, he told me. McGregor was seen going into the mailboxes and miscellaneous store. He was seen pulling out a bag and putting what looked like a paper lunch bag in the mailbox. Approximately 10 minutes after he left, another person was observed opening the same box. That person took the bag and left. We have pictures of the whole thing. Looks like this is how they make the switch. My guy made inquiries and found out the box was registered to McGregor. Talk about arrogance. Did you tell Ryan? I asked. Yeah, he replied. I talked to him just before he left. I don't understand, I said. Why would a respected police officer do something like that? I have a hunch, but I'll have to look into it further, he said. He invited the other man to join us. Shane, this is Peter Green. He works for me and will be staying here with you for the night. He will also accompany you wherever you go. I have another man who will keep an eye on things outside. I shook Peter's hand and noticed that he looked like a half-elf. Peter is a former Navy SEAL, so he can take care of himself. If anything happens, I want you to follow his lead, got it? Got it, I said. Good, he said. I'd better get going. Have a good evening and call me if anything happens. We said goodbye and I invited Peter to sit down. I made coffee and ordered pizza for the two of us. We spent the evening eating pizza and watching TV, swapping sea stories. Despite all appearances, Peter turned out to be a pretty nice guy. Finally, around 9 o'clock in the evening, I checked to see if there was any new activity on Kay's phone, and finding none, I grabbed my loaded shotgun and headed to bed, making sure Peter was set for the evening. Shane. I woke up at 4:15 Tuesday morning when my tablet buzzed, letting me know I had received an email with an attachment. I wiped my eyes from sleep and picked up my tablet. Opening the email, I found a letter from an address that I now knew belonged to Dan. Opening the email, I found a short note asking me to watch the attached video. She was already having fun with more than one man. There were several. I rewound the video until I saw her looking into the camera as if preparing to say something. What do you think of your whore wife now, asshole? She asked. Do you like what you see? I sure hope so. You'll be gone by Friday. That's right, asshole. My partner Mac will come to you and destroy you. So enjoy it while you can. Then I'll take your insurance money and spend the rest of my life having fun however I want, and with whomever I want. By the way, asshole, she said. Screw you, she exclaimed, raising both middle fingers up. And screw your stupid family vacation, she laughed. Shocked, I finished the video and sent it to Marion. I called her to let her know it had been sent. She answered on the first ring. Good morning, Shane, she said, as if she was still asleep. Is everything okay? No, I said. I'm sorry to call you so early, but I just got the video from Kay and it's disgusting. But there's a part in there where she admits to conspiring to destroy me. What? Asked Marion, shocked. Yeah, I said. That's pretty shocking. Good, she said. I'll take a quick look at it. Be in my office at 7:30 if you can. I'll be there, I said. I got up, unable to go back to sleep, showered, shaved, and got dressed. I went downstairs and made fresh coffee. Peter was already awake and watching the news. I offered him a cup of coffee and he accepted. It was still early, so I made us both breakfast. We watched the news while we ate. I have to run to a meeting with my lawyer early this morning, I said. You have to accompany me everywhere, right? That's what I was told, he replied. Good, I said. Do you need to freshen up, take a shower or anything? Already did, he said. I grabbed a couple paper coffee cups and sleeves and poured us each a cup. After locking the door, we went out. When we got there, Marion was already in her office. Ryan and Bill were in the office as well. She looked up when I walked in and waved us in. Good morning, Shane, she said. Ryan nodded and said a polite but curt, morning. Good morning, I said, nodding to Ryan. He looked like he hadn't gotten any sleep at all. We went over the video you got this morning, Marion said. I found the part you were talking about, and it looks like a confession to me. It feels that way to me too, Ryan said. Along with the threat of child endangerment. I've already informed my boss. And what did he say? I asked. He agrees with my assessment of the situation, Ryan said. The arrest warrant was turned over to the LA County Sheriff's Department last night, and the feds got a warrant for Dan's arrest. They assured us that Kay and her lover will be picked up this morning. My office is expediting the extradition papers as we speak. That was fast, I said. Well, when there's a clear threat to the kids, we don't play around, he said. Besides, thanks to Bill's investigators and our friends at the DEA, we were able to get enough information to show sufficient cause to arrest McGregor. They'll be taking him from his apartment at any moment, if they haven't already. I take it you've made some progress in your investigation? I asked. Yes, Ryan said. It looks like McGregor had a pretty good operation that worked for him. The feds are officially calling it a criminal enterprise, which could mean a life sentence. Why? I asked, shaking my head. He's a police captain, for crying out loud. He's up to his eyeballs in debt, Bill said. His wife caught him cheating and divorced him a couple years ago. Gave him to the cleaners. He's barely making ends meet, paying alimony and everything else. Ryan looked at his watch. I better get going, he said. I haven't slept in 2 days. Now all I have to do is wait. The feds are going to check out some clinics in the area and are showing interest in your wife's lover. Call me if you hear anything, okay? I nodded my head and shook his hand, thanking him for his efforts. This definitely makes a difference with your divorce, Marion said. No doubt the court will let her take the kids. Besides, she'll be behind bars. I suggest we don't sue her until we see what the court does. We will have a much better chance if she ends up in jail. However, there is still the matter of the 2 biological fathers. I've done preliminary research on both of them. I don't think you'll get anything out of Mike Jacques, the father of your oldest child. He simply has no real assets to speak of. Dr. Winstead, on the other hand, is another matter. If you want, Shane, I can start the paperwork and maybe negotiate something with him. We might even be able to settle without filing any paperwork or going to court. Is that something you'd like to pursue? Absolutely, I said. Good, she said. Why don't you go home and get some rest and I'll get back to you. I thanked her and left, and Peter followed me. Early in the morning, I was awakened by a loud banging. At first, I thought it was in my head, but I soon realized it was the door. I looked at the clock. 5:30 in the morning. Who would be banging on the door so early in the morning? I woke Dan up and he got out of bed, threw on a robe and staggered to the door. Police! Open up, I heard. Well, I thought, that's the answer. But why would the police be knocking on our door so early? As soon as Dan opened the door, several huge police officers entered the room, 2 of whom threw Dan back against the wall and snapped handcuffs on his hands behind his back. 2 of the policemen approached me as I lay in bed. One of them looked down at me. Are you Kay McKnight? One of them asked. Yes, I replied, still not coming to my senses. Get up, you're under arrest, he said. Arrested? I asked, pulling the blanket up to my chin. For what? For conspiracy to commit murder, for one thing, he said. You're also under arrest for violating federal laws regarding the illegal diversion and sale of controlled substances. Now get up. I'm not dressed, I said. Can I at least get dressed? The officer pointed to 2 female police officers who pulled something half-decent out of a closet. The male officers turned away, and the women handed me a pair of jeans, socks, underwear, and a t-shirt. I pulled on the underwear and jeans without taking off my clothes and put on the t-shirt as the female officers continued to cover me. I sat on the edge of the bed and put on my boots and socks. The female officers picked me up and turned me around, reading me my Miranda rights as they handcuffed me. I looked back, but Dan was already gone. What about my phone? I asked. One of the female officers took it from the dresser and put it in her pocket. They led me out of the building and put me in the back seat of a car with flashing lights. The policewoman who had taken the phone from me sat in the back with me, and the other female officer sat in the front seat. Soon we all went to the station where we were processed. I felt so awkward being photographed. Can I at least make a phone call? I asked. The officer pointed to the phone on the desk, so I decided to call Shane. Can I use my phone? I asked. Sorry, it's being held as evidence, the officer said. Use this one, she added, pointing to the desk phone. It took me a moment to remember his number. I was so used to my contact list. He answered after the second ring, and I realized he was in the car. What? He asked angrily. Shane, honey, it's me, I said, my voice shaking. Holy shit, he said. What do you want? Shane, I got arrested, I told him. He said, yeah, that's what happens when you plot the murder of your husband and kids, he said. By the way, they're picking up your partner in crime this morning. Oh no, I thought. Mac had told me there was no way they were going to catch us. Please, Shane, I need help, I pleaded. Yes, you do, he said. Maybe you can get it when you finally get to jail. Until then, screw you, bitch. He ended the conversation, leaving me staring at the headset. I handed it back to the officer behind the desk. How long am I going to be here? I asked. Can I post bail or something? No bail has been set, the officer said. You are in custody pending extradition to Pittsburgh. Oh my God, I thought to myself. What about the man they brought in with me? Dan King? The officer looked at her computer for a moment. Mr. King is currently being extradited for federal charges in Columbus, she said. This is it, I thought. I'm sunk. The officer took me to my cell, where I sat down on the cold, hard concrete seat and stared at the walls, shocked at how far and fast I had fallen. Shane. I finished talking to Kay and laughed. I couldn't believe the bitch's insolence. She expected me to help her after conspiring to kill me and the boys. She could rot in jail if I cared. Right now, I hated that bitch like I had never hated anyone or anything in my entire life. Talk about nerves, I said. Peter smiled and nodded his head as I drove. Yeah, he said. We pulled up to my house and went inside. Out of curiosity, I checked to see if there was anything new on Kay's phone. There was nothing, so I called the hotel, explained the situation, and arranged to have her things packed up and sent home. After that, we sat down in the living room, and I turned on the TV. Peter's phone rang, and he left the room for a few minutes while I flipped through the channels. Turn on the news, he said, when he came back into the room. I switched to the local news channel, and we saw a reporter standing in the parking lot outside an apartment building. Captain Alfred McGregor, a highly decorated police officer, was shot and killed early this morning in this apartment complex right here, the reporter said, pointing to the apartment building behind him. According to authorities we spoke with, the shooting occurred during an arrest that was made as a result of an investigation into a conspiracy to sell stolen prescription drugs. Details of the arrest and investigation are not being released, but we were told the police chief will hold a press conference later today. As I watched, my cell phone rang. I saw it was Bill and answered it. Did you see the news? He asked. Saw it, I replied. What happened? From what I was told, McGregor opened the door and started shooting when he saw the officers, Bill said. That's when they returned fire and took him down. So I'm safe, right? I asked. Let's take our time, he told me. I'd like Peter to keep an eye on you for the rest of the week. I don't think McGregor has anyone who will be after you, but let's be cautious. Sounds good to me, I said. Have a good day, he said. I'll talk to you later. Thanks, I said, and ended the conversation. I looked at Peter. Looks like you're staying here for the rest of the week, I said. Do you need to buy anything for the first time? He shook his head. I have everything I need, he said. But thanks anyway. I closed my eyes and breathed a sigh of relief. Later that day, Peter and I went to the boys' house. After we ate, I told them about the day's events. So, is Mom going to jail? John asked. Asked John. Looks like it, son, I said. Probably for a very long time. He got very quiet after that. I knew I was going to have to work hard. Being a single parent is hard enough as it is, and now the boys would have to deal with a mother in prison. Thank God I have loving and understanding relatives who love the boys as much as I do, I thought to myself. The rest of the week went by pretty quickly. Now I knew that the boys and I would be safe. On Wednesday, Marion informed me that Kay had been returned to Pittsburgh. The court hearing was scheduled for Thursday, so I made sure to be at the courthouse. I watched as Kay was led in, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, her arms and legs shackled, and the chains connected to another chain around her waist. It didn't take long for the judge to order her detention without bail. She sobbed as she was led back out. Her attorney, a public defender, asked me if I could bring the boys to the jail to visit her. I informed him that the boys had made it clear that they did not want to see her again. Marion informed me that the divorce papers were ready to be served and asked if I wanted to be present that Friday when the bailiff handed them to her. I agreed and met him at the jail. They brought Kay to the visiting area, still shackled. She looked up at me and smiled weakly. I just stared at her. A bailiff approached her and asked if she was Kay McKnight. I am, she replied. He handed her the papers and stepped back. I watched as she snatched the papers and began sobbing. In a normal situation, I would have offered her comfort, but not now. I stepped forward and held out a pen to her. Sign the goddamn papers, bitch, I told her. Don't I get anything? She asked with tears in her eyes. Not no, but hell no, I said. You won't need anything where you're going anyway. Can I at least see the boys? She asked. I shook my head. They don't want to see you anymore, I told her. As far as me and the boys are concerned, you're dead to us. And speaking of dead, you know your partner in crime was killed the day they tried to arrest him. I heard that, she said. Please, Shane, forgive me. No, I said. I loved you with all my heart for 13 years or more, And what have you repaid me with? By lying, cheating, and denying me the chance to have children of my own. I hate you with every fiber of my being, and I will never, ever forgive you for what you did to us. Now sign the goddamn divorce papers and be done with it. Sobbing, she slowly picked up the pen and signed the papers on all the lines Marion had marked. When she was done, I handed the packet of papers to the bailiff. Thank you, he said. I'll return them to Mrs. Hawkins, and she'll file them with the court. I watched him walk away, then turned to Kay again. I just want to know one thing, Kay, I said. She looked up at me. What? She asked. Why? Asked me. Why did you do it? She shrugged. I don't know, she said. Because I wanted to, and I could, I guess. And look where that got you, I asked. I shook my head. You're in serious trouble. But it's not my problem anymore. I looked around the gloomy room. You know, I have a feeling you're going to die behind walls like these. And you know what? No, Shane. What? She asked. I can't wait to pee on your grave when you do, I said, returning her own words to her. She started sobbing, but I didn't care. One last thing, from me and the guys, I added. What? She asked, looking more wistful than I'd ever seen her before. I raised both hands and extended my middle fingers. Screw you, bitch, I said, and turned away. I heard her sobbing uncontrollably as I walked away. Too bad, I thought. Epilogue. Kay's murder-for-hire trial went pretty quickly. Since the boys were also the target of her plan, she was sentenced to a term ranging from 25 years to life. The federal drug investigation dragged on for several more months, and Kay ended up getting an additional life sentence for her role in what prosecutors officially called a criminal enterprise. She could have been sentenced to death because the drugs she gave McGregor were ultimately linked to at least 2 deaths. Dan was tried separately for his role and was also sentenced to life in prison. My boys and I went on with our lives. They never wanted to visit their mother, so I respected their wishes and didn't insist on it, although Cliff and Julie did visit their daughter once a month. It took some time to get used to being single parents. Cliff and Julie helped out a lot, and the boys enjoyed spending time with their grandparents. Julie kept urging me to find a nice girl and settle down, but I just wasn't ready. After what Kay had done, I wasn't sure I could trust or love another woman again. However, a couple weeks after Kay signed the divorce papers, I had a vasectomy reversal, even though the doctor said it might be a long time before I could father children. A few weeks after Kay signed the divorce papers, Marion contacted me and said she had something for me. What? I asked. You need to come by my office, she said. So I went. When I arrived, she pulled out a bottle of champagne, which she kept in an ice bucket, and poured a couple glasses. One of them she held out to me along with an envelope. Go ahead and open it, she said. I opened the envelope and found a check for $5 million, signed by Dr. Winstead. I looked at her, shocked. How did you manage that? I asked. Well, she said, I convinced Dr. Winstead that it was in his best interest to settle with you. After I pointed out the potentially devastating and embarrassing divorce his wife would almost certainly want, and the damage to his reputation as a scientist and healer, he decided to enter into an out-of-court agreement rather than try to explain why he forced you to undergo an unnecessary medical procedure after your wife became pregnant. Wow, I said. Remind me never to get on your bad side. She laughed. By the way, that's your after-tax profit, she said. He also paid all your fees and expenses. He must be a very rich man, I said. She shook her head. He is, she said. Just last year alone, he gave more to charity than he did this year, so he's not that bad off. She raised her glass in a toast, and I joined her. My self-exile from women lasted about 5 years. That's when I met Lori Reynolds, one of John's teachers. Like me, she was a single-parent family with one son, a year younger than John. She too was divorced and trusted men about as much as I trusted women. We dated for about a year until I got up the courage to pop the question. She said yes, and a couple months later we were married. About a year after that, she gave birth to a baby girl, Sarah Jane, named after both of our mothers. Tears filled my eyes as I held that little ball of joy in my arms for the first time. Lori realized that Sarah was the first baby I had actually given birth to and hugged me tightly. I called the boys and their grandparents into the room and turned Sarah around so they could see her. Boys, I said, looking at Cliff and Julie. Meet your new sister, Sarah Jane. They immediately snuggled up to her, and I knew it was going to be okay. While Lori, the kids, and I moved on with our lives, Kay's life went downhill and continued for about 6 more years after Sarah was born. A few months after her first conviction, Kay was diagnosed with HIV and was separated from the rest of the inmates. She died of full-blown AIDS about 13 years after her initial diagnosis. Since no one wanted to claim her body, she was buried in Potter's Field with a simple plaque with her inmate number. I wanted so badly to fulfill my promise to pee on her grave, but Lori convinced me otherwise. "Come on, sit here with me," she said as I walked out onto the back porch. When I sat down, she poured me a cup of her chamomile tea. I thanked her and took a sip, savoring the flavor. She looked at me for a moment before saying something. "Shane, I know how hard it was for you to get over what Kay did, but you have to let it go and move forward," she said. "It's hard, baby," I said, "and it still hurts like hell." "I know," she said. "You know, if I thought it would do any good, I'd go with you and piss on her grave with you. You know that, don't you?" I nodded my head. "Yes," I said. "But now she's gone, and she can never hurt you again," Lori said. "Look at it this way. Kay suffered from AIDS for almost as long as you were married to her. She died in that horrible place, unloved, unforgiven, abandoned, and forgotten by everyone. She paid the ultimate price for what she did. What else can you do?" I had to admit she was right. "Have you told the boys yet?" she asked. By this time, all the boys had left home and were in college. "I told John and Robert," I replied. "At first they thought I was talking about you. Then I told them I meant their own mother." "How did they take that?" she asked. "They didn't seem to care," I said. "And what does that tell you?" she asked. "Probably about them moving on with their lives," I said in response. "That's right," she said. "They've moved on with themselves. And so should you. Shane, you're the best husband a girl could wish for, and you're the best father any child could dream of. Think about it. You loved and raised John and Robert even after you found out you weren't their biological father. You took in and adopted Mark even though you weren't his biological father. He's a good boy," I said. She smiled. "Thanks in large part to you," she said. "You taught him what it means to be a man, and I know for a fact that he considers you his real father." We looked at Sarah, who was playing in the yard. "Didn't you tell me once that Kay wanted that Dan guy to give her a daughter?" asked Lori. "Yeah, that's right," I replied. It seemed like an eternity had passed since that fateful Friday night, but I still hadn't forgotten her words. "Just think about it," Lori said. "If she hadn't been so stupid and greedy and selfish, you could have given her that daughter, and Sarah would never have been born." I had to admit she was right. I hadn't thought about the irony of the whole situation before. I kissed my wife. Suddenly, I heard Sarah come toward us, holding a white flower with 3 petals. "Daddy," she said, "look what I have for you." I looked up as she held out the flower to me. I recognized it as a white trillium, a flower that grew in abundance in area parks. Kay often made small bouquets of them. I liked the white variety, but hated the rotten smell of the red ones. "Thank you, dear," I said. "That woman said you really like them," Sarah said. Lori and I looked around the yard but didn't see anyone. "Which lady?" asked Lori. "That one over there," said Sarah, pointing to the part of the yard where she was playing. We looked, but didn't see anyone. Goosebumps ran down my spine, and we looked at each other. There was no sign that anyone was there. "What else did the woman say?" asked Lori. Sarah shrugged her shoulders. "She said to tell you that she's sorry for everything and wants you to forgive her," Sarah said, looking at me. I still couldn't see anyone, but I noticed the vegetation swaying slightly, as if touched by a light breeze. We felt a sudden gust of cold air, but it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. I looked at Lori, tears glistening in my eyes. I nodded my head. "I guess it's time," I said, knowing this was going to be the hardest thing I'd ever done. Lori smiled, and Sarah put her arms around my neck. After all, Kay is now dead and buried, a part of my past. These 2 girls are my present and future, I thought, and they deserve my full love and attention. "I forgive you, Kay," I whispered, looking up at the sky. Sarah hugged me tighter and kissed my cheek. "I love you, Daddy," she said. "Thank you." She slid off my lap and ran back into the yard. I looked at my wife, wondering what the hell had just happened. She smiled and kissed me on the lips. At that moment, I felt happier and more content than I had ever felt in a long time, as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Maybe, I thought to myself, happiness really is the best revenge. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.